Hello, everyone. Welcome to Libraries Instant Response, session 138 in our ongoing series, 5.5 years. And we are happy to have you here. Oh, let me share. Happy to have you back or for the first time as we go through this and land on what we think is not a traditional library topic, but relevant to the library world, to public services of all type, especially related to learning and education. So I'm glad you're here for what is the Trusted Library Learner Network. And we will get to that momentarily. My name is Don Means. I'm the director of the Gigabit Libraries Network. We're producing this series in collaboration with IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions based in The Hague, our longtime partner in universal public access is where we really kind of engaged years and years ago. And then we started this more or less together at the dawn of the pandemic, which hopefully everyone remembers. Our speaker, Kate Giovanni, I hope that got that right, Kate. We'll get back to you here momentarily. I'm going to get through this introduction here, but first,
Wonderful.
we, of course, thank our sponsors, which make this possible. The state libraries in New Jersey and Texas and Washington and Delaware, not to mention, well, no, to mention our commercial sponsor, Mission Telecom, and IFLA is coming on board as a new sponsor, surprisingly, but great. And we just couldn't do it without their support, uh, and we thank them. This is our, excuse me, go-to emblem of what we think the spirit of libraries and response is. These are global crises impending on the world uh, as global issues, but crises come at every scale: global, regional, local, personal, and libraries are involved in responding to all of those, and they need support. I mean, it's not selfless to support libraries. It's a very selfish thing to do is to support libraries because they support everybody. So take that to heart. I just want to touch on, well, climate, of course, is one of the crises, not one of, I think it's the overarching crisis that makes all the others kind of seem not quite incidental, but, in the big picture, they're just not as big of a deal as the climate becoming unlivable. Uh, and it's just interesting that Gates, having boosted the climate response for years now, suddenly decides that it's not that big of a deal. We need to come up with a new vaccine for Zika virus or something. It's it's just terrible timing, which is classic Gates. It reminds us of the Gates Foundation support of libraries. The Global Libraries Program was a great initiative. It really helped a lot of libraries and, of course, millions of people who depend on libraries to access the internet and digital services. And then just as things were really at a pivotal point in the early 2010s, I guess we would call them, they pulled the rug on that program and said, "Well, that's enough of that." Well, it wasn't. I mean, we still have not completed this work of bridging the digital divide. Now, we think everybody should have access to this as a basic service. Broadband is what I mean. It's was historically a tradition in the U.S. that this was a basic service, and once it's considered a basic service, then we as a society affirm that everyone should have affordable access to it. So that was true of electrification, true of telephone service, and most of our utilities are like that. The the economics of infrastructure, which those all are, dictates that the profitability that would normally drive deployment, market forces, invariably run out as you get farther away from the core of any network. It's just infrastructure 101. The farther away you get, the more expensive it is to deliver services, and there are fewer people, and they tend to have less money. So, according to the principle that we have about universal service, our solution as a polity is to extract revenues from the profitable markets, urban dense markets, and subsidize the less profitable markets. And that's the way we blend it and get there. That's what we did with electrification, telephone, and we do it with gas and water and so forth. So why didn't we do that with broadband? Broadband. Well, at that moment, which was the mid '90s when the web exploded, the carriers said, no, we're not that. We're not utilities. We're not subject to the universal service principle. We're just technology companies. We're in business to make money and we'll invest where we can expect a return. And that basically cut off large portions of the country. Even if it were fewer people, those fewer people occupy the majority of the real estate of the country. And that real estate translates into a political power, not just the one-to-one voter kind of power we generally think of. But these counties are political entities, and the people living in them have suffered from a lack of this basic utility that it should be considered a utility because almost every activity, social, political, economic activity, depends upon access to the internet. Hence, these small towns have suffered. The kids all leave, no companies will move in, the future is bleak. They shrink, they're drying up, and people living in these places are upset. They're fearful, they're angry, and they'll resort to pretty much anything if they think there's no future. And that has created, in our opinion, part of the political crisis that we're in now. And so Gates, once again, well, this is of course climate related, but it was not unlike what they did with the Global Libraries Program on pulling the rug. Right now, we need just the opposite of this climate's no big deal attitude. But I guess that's the privilege of people with unlimited money. And as we have learned, thanks to the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court, that money is speech. That's that hasn't always been considered the case. And corporations haven't always been considered people. They have, in the current environment, that gives them a special privilege. They can they can do anything a citizen can do, but they don't suffer the same consequences for their actions. You don't lock them up. You can fine them, but they have that factored in. So money equals speech has led to money equals power. And so government services now are overwhelmed by massive amounts of money, and the acquisition of political power has really, we haven't seen anything like this maybe in 100 years. We are, as commonly referred to, reminiscent of the Gilded Age. And that was another technological moment when the builders of the railroads had incredible funds, and it was, a really big deal. And this is not a rap against capitalism. It's inventive, it is creative, and we have benefited from these inventions that allow people to make enormous amounts of money, which is fine. It's just that there has to be a balance. And that's the problem. The government has to provide the balance to the overreach because companies, corporations, anybody in business wants to dominate whatever market they're in. It's just the way you're motivated. And so there has to be a check on that, so that it doesn't just completely overwhelm the balancing power of public uh, surveillance. So not surveillance, but uh, regulation. So we saw that with antitrust, and I guess we give a lot of credit to Teddy Roosevelt, who followed McKinley at the turn of the century for implementing trust busting. Well, we've tried that, but the modern era of technology is difficult to use antitrust law. Not impossible, but it's difficult. And if you lack the will to do that, that is to say the government lacks the will, then it's virtually impossible. So we're in a hole, but that's just one of many. As the federal government fails, as it's captured and reduced in its power, services tend to devolve to states. Fortunately, the country was built on states. So the states are in position with native power to deal with services that people rely on. And of course, it continues to devolve to communities. And more, that's the circumstance. Communities, you're more and more on your own. So what does that lead to? Well, it leads to community services like, guess who? The libraries. And their value is only increasing as the internet kind of and shitifies is the current term. It becomes less reliable, less trustworthy. And so trust is a new asset. And when you look around who has it, nurses and firemen and librarians seem to have it. Well, nurses and firemen are great. I mean, we depend upon them, right? Well, maybe that's why we trust them, because we're so dependent upon them. But librarians have trust that's just earned from giving people, what they want without an agenda. And this is just spectacular invention. I'll put it right up there with the railroads and all the rest of them as a critical invention of humanity. Libraries grounded in the principle that informed and educated citizenry is the key to a free society. It could not be more true right now, and we could not be farther away from our goals of being informed and educated. And part of that is due to the systems that we built to accomplish those things. And a lot of those are administrative. The use of AI in delivering public services is a great application. What traditionally we have done in terms of thinking about these service delivery systems is that we look for ways to make them more efficient and more productive. That was like e-government was designed to do that. You don't have to go down to the thing and mess with all this paper. You can do it right from your desktop. But that relies on people having access to it, which we don't all, as we're far from a complete implementation of universal broadband. And so libraries are there as a backstop, as they are for so many cases. And this is just a great AI quote from IFLA that I wanted to just share there as we get to our speaker. My point is that the Trusted Learner Network addresses these administrative challenges, which is to say, building systems to make systems efficient is different than building systems that support the people that they're supposedly designed for, people. And in the TLN, it puts the learner back at the center of the design and the evolution of these support systems, and how a lot of the barriers of moving across these different services And databases, it is a challenge to many people, whether it's, in a learning environment or other public kinds of services. Well, how do we get information from over here that's relevant to this person or this family over to here, where it's also relevant to us because they're just different databases or they're different lines of pursuit. Well, this is what we're going to hear about today from Kate, who's thankfully joined us today to tell this story. So, Kate, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time today, and we're so interested to hear about your work, and also tell us, how you came to this work. This is something that you thought of, when you were a teenager? I'm going to end up doing, or there's a path that you came along. We'd be interested. This is kind of the way we do it. We kind of like the personal
Lovely.
background on people and how they've gotten today, and then the work that they're doing today. So welcome, Kate.
Wonderful.
Take it away.
Thank you so much, Don. I am so grateful for the opportunity to be here to speak with you all today. Kate Giovacchini. I am an executive director in the Office of the Chief Information Officer at Arizona State University. My story starts, honest to God, this is not pandering, but part of my story starts in the Scottsdale Public Library, which is the place that I would disappear to as really an elementary school kid because it was down the road from the Boys and Girls Club I went to. And I would go there and sit in the periodical section and watch the people. And they had a really gorgeous, really fun children's area. But the time that I spent there informed and was informed by a very young love of reading and of books. And so as I moved forward, and kind of realized, gosh, I'm not really great at anything else other than reading books and maybe writing papers about them. Uh, I ended up coming to Arizona State University and I got an English literature degree. My focus was broad as a bachelor student, but had many. I mean, I'm so lucky. Had three or four professors that really influenced my way of thinking, both from a sort of critical theory perspective, but also opened my eyes up to different parts of the literary canon and kind of outside of the literary canon. And I ended up focusing in American poetry of the 20th century because that was the framework through which my experience led. So from there, I graduated into a very weak economy and ended up taking whatever work I could get. And that work ended up being doing tech support in a call center. So I did that work for 3 or 4 years, and it always liked helping people. But the opportunity that you get when you're doing something like helping people with their problems for 8 hours a day is you really start to get a strong understanding of kind of how that process works and also how trust starts to form, right? Trust being this sort of risk that we take to overcome uncertainty and recognizing that some people are willing to take that risk immediately. Some folks are extremely uninterested in advancing trust, but it started messing around with that there. But I got an opportunity to come to ASU because a friend of mine got a job here and I returned as a staff member. I've done all the jobs that you can do in technology aside from writing code, which I'm not great at. People don't realize that writing code is about 10% creativity and 90% fixing your own mistakes. Um, it is a job of uh, of repair, and I was always the kid that like wrote the paper and then sent it out before ever going back and reading it. Uh, so I did every job aside from being a programmer or a developer in technology, and kind of ended up in this space because trust is something that's always been interesting to me. So that bridges us over into the Trusted Learner Network. And I think what we could set ourselves up to talk about today is what is the Trusted Learner Network? Like fundamentally, it is a tool for learner or individual agency, right? It's a tool to put control of one's own assets and accomplishments back into their hands, which I think is something that perhaps aligns with the ethos of the library as a place where folks uh, self-improve at their own drive. Okay, so you can think about it as an agency tool, and we can also think about it as a trust tool. So, Don, if it's okay, I can jump into my slides and we can get going here. Great. Let me just uh, presenter view. Fabulous. Okay, all right. So welcome to the Trusted Learner Network. I'm so excited to talk about this. The way that I always like to start these discussions is with a framing from my organization, something that me and my staff all really take to heart, which is our ASU charter. So ASU considers itself a public research university, measured not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes and how they succeed. I think this work really aligns with that because we see digital credentials as a tool for inclusion. Additionally, ASU spends a lot of its focus on advancing research and discovery of public value, and also this idea of assuming fundamental responsibility for the communities it serves. Research and discovery of public value, we do over $1 billion of research a year, and I like to think that our work sits on the little r, little d research and discovery as we engage with students and learners. And also, of course, in higher education, I'd like to think that we all do have responsibility for each other, right? Higher education is a community and it develops a community of learners, and we all owe them our undying fealty. So here are some of the problem statements that we started this work with. Today, there are about 42 million people in this country that have some college, no credential, AKA some college and no degree. And that equals to about 37 million of people of working age. And effectively, I mean, the story we're telling here is like 18% of the total population has touched college, but not gotten a degree or some sort of terminal credential. And we see that as a huge challenge nationally, right? Understanding that uh, education is the pathway to the more advanced work, the more advanced economic success, and also understanding that education is a pathway to a more fulfilled or more rounded and meaningful life. We think that this is a massive opportunity to return to these students and provide additional things of value, right? How do we start addressing this challenge, not just traditionally by saying, gosh, we got to get 37 million butts and seats, and we got to get those people towards degrees. But how can something like a credential span the gap and help people advance even if they don't have a degree? So that's sort of challenge number one, this credit mobility challenge. Challenge number two is something that kind of emerges from more of the workforce space. So this says recently credentialed students and experienced workers are struggling to communicate their competencies and credentials to find the best jobs and career advancement opportunities. And what I would also append to this is also to express internally the value of time spent, the value of money spent pursuing things like education. So this is just the very simple fact that we have experiences and tend to have a difficult time recalling them accurately, comprehensively, and being able to speak to, I took this class or this training. What the heck did I learn? All right. So I want to do a little bit of framing and trust, and then we'll talk about like, well, what did we think was the answer to this problem? But I always like to say that we are fundamentally rooted in trust. And here's how I think of trust. So Don, you were talking about this, and I like to think I was looking at my slides, and I think that uh, this edifice over here on the right-hand side might be a library. Okay, so when we think about trust, right, the way that trust changed together there's interpersonal trust. So who are our communities? Who are our friends? Who are our enemies? Who are the people that we explicitly trust or don't trust based on a set of experiences that we've had? Again, taking risks to overcome uncertainty. And that can look like something as small as telling a secret, right? That can look as large as um, uh, giving somebody power of attorney, right? Trust is about uncertainty. When we exist in a space where there is complete certainty over an outcome, trust is not required. That's what computer science tells us. And I think that that's a fascinating um, a differentiation and something good to keep in mind. So interpersonal trust is something that many of us understand, especially aligned with sort of like neurotypical people and neurodiverse people work in this framework as well, just in slightly different ways. But so interpersonal trust, we get that. I had one conversation with Dawn, and I said, Dawn's lovely. I am going to come on this podcast. I'm going to trust Dawn. Um, so then we can go into places like institutional trust, right? Which is slightly removed because when people come to a library, um, sometimes they are interacting specifically with their librarian, or sometimes they're interacting specifically with their professor or their bank teller. Uh, but other times and through other processes, people are like interacting with an institution. They're interacting with a bank, a library, a higher education institution. They don't know the name of the person that they have to talk to get this process done. And that presents a different set of uncertainty. And it also kind of removes some of the tools that we have intuitively to understand trust. Okay. Institutional trust is important for us because when we think about credentials, all that work is about trusting that people are who they say they are and that they've done what they said they've done. So moving from there, institutional trust, like here's where it gets really interesting. So this is a representation of sort of what our life looks like now. And what I want to point out is that there is an enormous set of intermediaries that sit between us and the institutions and the individuals that we interact with. Right. So I would say, in a way, you can think of this as the distortion grows stronger because we're even further away from the intuitive understanding of trust that we have when we meet five people at a conference and really connect with one. So the tools that we have here, right, knowledge or context or negotiation or being able to selectively disclose, uh, like are not the tools that we necessarily have here. And there's a couple that I really want to dial in on, which is, you know, what is this and who makes it? So credentials are effectively a way for an organization with a larger amount of power to imbue a little bit of its trust and credibility into an individual, right? When an institution gives you a degree, they are saying, we, as a powerful institution or organization, are going to give you a little bit of our brand, a little bit of our credibility, and you're going to be able to go forward in the world. But this is sort of in question. It's really hard to tell right now what a thing is and who makes it. I think other things that are really important here are things like um, being able to disclose. So we kind of live in a world where if you want access to a service or a technology, you often don't have a choice over the information that you provide to them to allow them to utilize that service. And we think that that is part of kind of what's contributing to this other challenge. So we're going to take that framing of trust, right, which is we're in a difficult to navigate trust environment. We have individuals that are seeking out opportunity. We have organizations interested in imbuing those individuals with opportunity there. And we said, well, God, we need a transport mechanism that looks a lot more like this or really like this. We need a way to communicate across the internet in a way that matches this a little bit more rather than being just a really dissolute challenging space to navigate. So how do we do that? And the answer that we came across is this concept of verifiable credentials. So there's been some really interesting advancement in the higher education space around the concept of a verifiable credential. A verifiable credential being a piece of data, just really simple concept, a piece of data that has a durable signature on it that can be proven as accurate. So I could hold a credential, I could provide it to Don, and Don could check that credential for accuracy as a standalone object without ever having to go back to my employer or go back to my institution. And so in a way, I really think what our work does is it aligns beautifully with this idea that folks get to own and maintain their own identity, right? Credentials as a tool that we can move around the world with rather than being surveilled. They become assets that we carry around. So we see on this page this idea of verifiable credentials, the skills gap, and we see a lot of tagging here about the idea of uh, digital wallets. So digital wallets are also another a part of this solution, but effectively what we're talking about is how do we create verifiable data and how do we give learners a place to put it? So I will briefly run by the fact that this work has always been about not just Arizona State University, but it has been about the higher education community at large. And that I think is represented by the number of collaborators that we've had on a governance and technology level. And this group of collaborators represents public institutions, private institutions, 2 years, 4 years, urban and rural. There's always critical for us because what we want to do is develop technology that enables any higher education institution to move forward. And I think that's also reflective. I think we all know how this works, but reflective in the number of funders that have discovered this solution and said, there's a piece of this for us and for our goals. So what are we actually talking about? We're going to get right into the technology so y'all can envision what we're actually discussing. Okay, so um, at a high point, this is a terrible slide and I apologize, but I want you to just look at the sections that are highlighted in gold here, which is that we have a credential platform and we have a wallet. And let's jump right into it. So what are we doing? We're talking about the Trusted Learner Network. We recognize that there were some fundamental issues that were preventing people from A, getting value from the education that they've received, and B, being able to talk about it, explain it, share it in a way that that could net them an opportunity. So, number one, what does the TLN do? One, it collects credentials in one safe place. So the idea behind the TLN is that institutions that join it, their students can attach multiple credentials from multiple different institutions together into one location. And the idea that you get when you do that is that you suddenly are able to see not just the very separate experience of what you might have uh, at your 2 year institution or at your 4 year institution. What you actually get is the opportunity to combine and see what does my holistic student experience look like. All right, that's a very novel concept. Being able to see all that information together, especially considering, all those courses and credentials and degrees, you know, for me as an end user, those are all the same thing. I bucket those all in the mental filing cabinet of education. And what our tooling does is allows people to do that. Now, why? Why is that important? So one of the reasons we know is it's important is that people have to make decisions based on their education, and they have to do that uh, in order to not just potentially finish a degree, but things like, gosh, I need to get a job. What am I good at? What do I have evidence that I'm good at? And we really upfront recognize that if we can put this data into the hands of our individual users, that there's a whole garden of valuable services that might emerge on top of that. Stuff like being able to use AI to pull the skills out. What are the skills that are most frequent in my learning record? Or what jobs might I already be qualified with my learning record? Okay. So here I am. I have all my stuff gathered together in my little TLN web app. Um, how do I share it? Right? I think sharing and data privacy are something that we likely share sort of across the aisle from higher education to the world of libraries, right? We you it's my it's not my understanding. It is with my like enormous adoration that libraries are often setting the absolute bar, right, for civil rights and privacy and saying, what people check out or what people do here is specifically their own business, and we have created these spaces for free exploration. We share a strong set of values around the fact that people should be able to manage consent at a very granular level over how they share their data. So let's move from a world where, in order for me to say, get an opportunity at an employer by applying an application, like maybe I shouldn't have to give you my social security number up front, or my name, or my gender, or my nationality, or any number of other things. That data may not, is actually likely extremely not required at the front end of an employment situation, right? If I want to go work for Don, I want Don to know that I am a person that has a set of qualifications that is interested in the job that he's listing. Don doesn't need to know what my doesn't need to know other vectors in order to start making initial decisions that might affect me. Why does that matter? I think that matters because our data currently, our digital lives are spread across a number of large scale commercial actors that have used that data to generate revenue repeatedly and consistently through time, right? The actions that I take, the individual information that I share, that's out of my control. It is being monetized basically without my express consent, right? It's monetized based on my general consent to use services. We think we can start to change that approach by saying to our students, right, who are at a critical time in their lives where they're expanding and learning and growing, where we can say to them, hey, you deserve to have consent over what types of data you share with other individuals, and you deserve to be able to withhold data that seems appropriate to you. So, managing consent is really critical. That looks like things like I'm going to share it with institution A, but I'm not going to share it with institution B. And it looks like things like, sure, I'll share my credential history, but I'm not going to share my name or my ethnicity because that's not important to you right now. So from there, from this web experience where I'm able to manage all of my credentials in one place, we get to this idea of the Pocket. And the Pocket is a mobile application that is designed. We like to think about this as the last mile, right? So a student comes and they take a course, or they take a micro credential, or they have a participatory experience, and we issue them a credential, and we want to make sure that it gets into their hands, right? Because these are objects, they're virtual objects, but they're objects of value, right? They're objects that might say, I have these particular skills, or I had this experience, or I volunteered here. And we wanted to put that into the place that everybody is interacting with all the time. And so therefore the mobile wallet. We know that not everybody has a cell phone. We know that cell phone ubiquity is constantly on the rise with all types of populations. And so the wallet isn't required, but the wallet is a really nice expression of being able to sort of carry stuff around and share it wherever you are, and with whomever you would like. So I can go ahead and show you all just a little bit of how this functions. So this is what the Trusted Learner Network looks like right now. People can import their achievements. And here we have an example of a student who starts off with 7 achievements, and we have a lot of data here, right? For them to understand, oh my gosh, what did I do when didn't I take a biology course? Okay, so here's a tool for not just remembrance, but a tool to like kind of demonstrate and bring forward the activities that a student has learned. Um, I think it's also worth noting here something that's very peculiar, perhaps, to the higher education world, which is in traditional higher education, we have one primary trust signal that we pass on to our students. And that one primary trust signal is a degree, right? So, did you earn a degree from us? Yes or no? If you did, you are imbued with a huge number of benefits, right? Things that like might help you get a job, things that tie you to other alumni of that institution. You're imbued with the credibility of that institution when you move around. And part of what we're trying to do here is to recognize, remember, think about our 42 million some college no credential students. Part of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to uncover or rediscover the granular value of the stuff that happens inside of that degree process, right? So when I look here and I see uh, the living world and I see a biology course, that is a course that contained its own specific skills that allowed that individual to learn their own set of competencies. And really, most importantly, that allowed that learner to have their own individual set of experiences. Okay. I always joke that I don't show my TLN in public that often because I had a pretty checkered undergraduate experience. And, so for me, I crossed the finish line. I was very fortunate for the support that I had. I graduated in 5 years. And my record is littered with um, the withdraws and the D's and the E's that were reflective of me really coming the hard way through my degree. Um, and it is through that, though, it is through those C's and D's and W's that I really can meaningfully tell my story, right? Those overcomings of failures are more important to me than the degree that I got at the end. So here we are, we're looking at all the stuff that we've earned. This is specifically at Arizona State University. Now we're going to go and we're going to add another institution. So Rio Salado College is an institution in our orbit, a fantastic community college that now offers 4 years degree. And see, I'm growing my experience. I'm growing my pocket full of credentials that I can then go about and use. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to briefly take an aside to see what that use might be. So here the student selects the credentials that they've earned, and what we're doing is we're pushing an anonymized set of that subset of that data out. And what we're going to fetch back are skills. So we're using an LMS, and those skills should come through. Oh, my demo, sorry. Here we go. So we're fetching our skills, and what we'll get back are 5 skills that might be related to the experience that this individual had. Okay, so why? Who cares, right? Part of this is about reaffirmation. You know, cool. We do have these skills now. Let's talk about them. Let's keep the conversation going. And another part of this is really like discovery, right? How do we help students imagine different directions that they might go that they might not otherwise be thinking? So from here, we'll do one more stop on this whirlwind tour, and we are going to go to take a look at the pocket real quick here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back to learning outcomes. So here's an individual setting up their Pocket Wallet app, which everybody can get at My Skills Pocket if they search in their Google or Apple Play stores. This is our ASU version. And like I said, this is the last mile about collecting data into my pocket so that I can walk around the world with it. We're going to go and I'm going to use the scan a QR code to scan a QR code that appears on the Trusted Learner Network when I want to share. And what's being exchanged here are these rich data assets that, again, coming back to the very beginning, have this specific signature on them that can guarantee that they're accurate, they're verified. And here our learner is. These things are in their pocket, in their hands, and they have any number of different ways that they can go ahead and share those data. So we've kind of converted, if I could take a step back and say it in one sentence, the Trusted Learner Network is all about converting what we think of as just like process or transaction data, converting that into credentials of value that students can go out and use to advance their lives. So what do we want to learn here? What are we hypothesizing? We have strong hypotheses around self-reflection and metacognition. We think that these credentials can help people learn about their learning, right? And become more confident and more expressive and have more agency over their learning experiences. We also think that credentials can lead to things like program and institutional affinity, right? They're an opportunity to underline the relationship that happens between an institution or, say, a library and the individual constituent that's utilizing it. We feel, again, that holding management can have improved outcomes as far as job placements or degree placements, which is really exciting. And then finally, a lot of energy in this space around career opportunities and growth. I am going to go ahead and pause or end here with this final slide of what our vision is for the future. So one, that everybody should be able to have a lifelong learner record that accompanies them from K-12 through to college, through their career, through their education, and it's a companion that helps to underline all the stuff that we've learned. Number two, that if we do that, we are also creating the ripe conditions for folks to build on that and use those credentials to get to further things of value, like what are the right jobs for me? Where's the next place that I should go? How should I upskill? Where should I do volunteer opportunities that align with me? Third thing, that verifiable credentials can really underline and advance things like authenticity and trust when we come to interactions like, hey, I'm Kate Jovacchini and I want to apply for a job here. I'm qualified for it, right? The authenticity and trust of those is only becoming increasingly important as AI moves further into our everyday world. And then finally, the long goal here is that we develop AI agents that can help students to do that work for them, right? So where's the AI agent that's taking my credentials and going out there and advocating for my dream job? So I'm going to stop there. I went 2 minutes over, Don, and I'm very sorry. But as you can tell, I get excited about this topic.
Not at all, Kate. This is brilliant. I mean, this is really fascinating stuff. Uh, I have a list of questions, of course, starting with, and maybe I missed it, the original input. There's a tremendous amount of information. How does it get into the system in the first place?
So that's a great question. We are lucky because our solution doesn't actually really generate any new data. The work that we do is sitting down with institutions. We started with our own, right? Because in higher ed, you always have to eat your own dog food or drink your own champagne. Um, but it starts as a journey of exploration where we sit down and say, hey, where are your credentials? And higher ed institutions say, oh, well, I store my degrees here. And we say, okay, let's go a little bit deeper. Where are those courses? Let's find the courses. Let's go a little bit deeper. You tracking when people are in clubs or organizations? Great. Let's grab that. What about when people are participating in events? So we do a scavenger hunt through the technologies that sit in an institution to figure out with that administration, what are the experiences of value that you think your students might like to have running around the world with them?
So it requires participation by the institution to build this.
One, yeah, 100%. When we go back to trust, what's really key is that a recipient can trust that the credential I am bringing forward is actually from the place that I earned it. And that trust is is applicable and meaningful, whether it's a degree from Harvard or if it's a course from your local community college, or it's an online upskilling course that a citizen may take in a particular library, right?
Okay, so is it the whole university or could it just be a school?
So we have, it can be either. So starting off with the school, of course, our aspiration is to get a whole university bought
Naturally.
in order to do this, because then that creates the maximum vector for student engagement.
Right. Well, what appeals, among other things, among many other things about this, is the challenge of a lot of library students, which have kind of, well, many come up through education, think they
Mm,
want to teach, but then they go, well, maybe not.
yeah.
So there's a lot of moving around to get there, and
Hmm.
the potential for this to help those people so we can have more librarians is really attractive. um, so you mentioned the rural institutions. So do they have a special challenge here with doing this that maybe large systems like ASU don't?
So I think they have challenges and they also have advantages. So the challenge when we think about a small, let's say 5,000 students rural community college is a resource challenge, right? If you have 5,000 students, you probably have maybe one or two people that do IT for your administration, and maybe you have a dozen people that do IT across your campus. So, that often is a barrier to adopting new technology solutions. And, part of the way that I think we overcome this is that we ask our 4 years and more resourced institutions to pitch in their part um, uh, to help their feeder schools get involved. What it seems to me like many rural institutions have that schools like ASU do not have are deep personal connections in with the community that surrounds them. So Motlow Community College, for instance, which is an incredible organization, sits in Tennessee, right in the heart of whiskey country. And so their president, because he's an intrepid and extremely charming and intelligent man, has gone around and forged relationships with the whiskey companies that are providing a huge amount of the local labor force, right? And saying, what do you guys want what do you want our people to walk in the door with? And that is a massive advantage, because then the credential is it's a great backup, right? But the trust is already really strong between the institution, the individual, and the potential employer.
There'd be so many examples of that
Oh my
where
God.
companies rely on, especially community colleges, to feed them the skill sets they need. Uh, Anybody want to ask Kate a question?
I
Jen, you
see
look like
Jen
you're ready.
Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Kate. It's a pleasure
Hi.
to hear you. I'm at a state library agency, and we're affiliated with Thomas Edison State University, which is a
Interesting.
public university in New Jersey, that's all online. And one of the things that we do is give credit for prior learning. And it seems like this would be a perfect kind of way to get to some of the things we're trying to do for our students in terms of really showing them holistically. Even as you mentioned with the whiskey, we have lots of relationships with corporate that, what are you looking for in a nursing student? What are you looking for in aviation and that kind of thing? May I forward your info to our president to push it down to where he has to go to?
Yeah, I'd absolutely love that. And I think that you're hitting on credit for prior learning, and where it gets really, really interesting around credit for prior learning is sort of an offshoot or a side effect of verifiable credentialing, which is to say that if we can start getting our data in order, libraries should really appreciate this, right? Because you guys are the taxonomizers and organizers and catalogizers of all time. Higher ed is pretty bad at that. We don't do a great job sharing information, but we get to a world of verifiable credentials, then the information that you need to even, start to understand and capture what a CPL experience is like, that becomes way more universally shareable than, we just converted this into an English 101 and good luck figuring out what we mean there.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I'm not sure. I don't work directly at the university, so I don't know where it falls within our various systems, but our IT or vice president that over chief IO kind of stuff seems like he'd be a good connection. So I've put him in touch with you because I think you could help us meet some of our larger institutional goals. I think the work that you're doing really matches nicely. So thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
That sets up a, thank you, Jen. That sets up an interesting question about your strategy for proliferating.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you're reaching out to university CIOs everywhere, or president, what's the plan?
I appreciate you asking, Don, because I've been at this for quite a while, and I feel like I'm pounding the pavement, kind of getting out there and selling this idea place by place. So sometimes we do talk to CIOs, chief information officers, or really high level tech people, and um, those folks are interested maybe in the opportunity for efficiency, right? They understand that standardized data just moves faster. Cool. But where we interestingly get I've had the most interesting conversations and made the greatest allies has been with people that tend to sit more in our provost's offices. So that is the part of the organization that oversees the teaching, learning, curriculum, what it means to sit people down into a classroom and teach them something. And we find that our vice provosts or presidents that are involved with the TLN one way or the other are really intrigued either A, by the opportunity to make more of those connections with their local economic community and offer their students more economic opportunity, or the folks that say, public trust in higher education is declining. And that is not, I don't think, just a coincidence. I think that's an intentional action that's being taken place. So they say, how do we increase the trust that our students have that they are coming here and they're spending their money in the right place? And credentials being a way to sort of constantly reiterate, you're learning this stuff, you're getting these skills, you're having these experiences, we're happy to have you here. Stay with us until the end.
So let me be clear. Is this a system or is this a process? I mean,
it's a system that affects a lot of processes. I mean, it's complicated, right? But ultimately, it is a system that elevates stuff that higher ed thinks of as process data, elevates it to the surface so that students can not only touch it and see it, but take it and run with it. Like take it and go use it in a way that they find to be valuable. Does that change a lot of processes?
I guess a better way to
No.
put it is this a product?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can call you up and order it, in effect, or borrow it or whatever.
Yeah, what we like to say, it's a product that is effectively it's a product that is a network. It's a product that requires a consortium to function.
Right.
When you get down to the brass tacks, we signed MOUs with institutions that come with a package of technology that institutions put into their org in order to do that action of lifting that stuff up out of it, out of the middle of the guts of your institution to the learner. So it is a product, but Don, it magnifies its power with every institution that joins it.
I understand that. It's the front end that I was unclear about. But I guess the TM was a tip-off that it was such an actual thing that I can call you up as Sarah in Washington, state librarian, with the state library in Washington, points out they have something similar. But anyway, you can check that out. How many institutions already?
So we are just starting out in production. This is a long way coming because trust me, we cut our fingers on this like bleeding edge technology plenty of times. But right now we consist of Arizona State University, and we're actually live in the progress of onboarding our local community college district, which we're starting with a phenomenal school called Rio Salado. But they have 10 institutions under their umbrella that we're going to shoot for. So there's two ways that we're going to go about this. One, which is you really get these massive economies of scale when you think about the regional areas where institutions are. 2 years and 4 years working together to educate a populace. So we think about that as the state of Arizona, as our local geographic area, which has 6 million people in it. But we can also think about that in the state level exchanges that might happen elsewhere in regional compacts. And so those are the groups that we're looking to bring on board. The big thing is with higher education institutions is that the folks that want to work with us tend to be like intrepid, innovative, let's get this ball rolling type of institutions. And we just love working with them because that's part of our DNA too.
They're out there, and
Yes,
you've
they
got
are.
an ace right there in your own institution. Lev Gonick, the CIO at ASU, is remarkable individual and has a fantastic network himself. So he's probably your number one outreach vehicle.
Oh, he is certainly the godfather of this project, and he is the individual that I'm personally report to for the success of the TLN and has been just a truly innovative, forward-thinking leader. For him, who's been in the information technology business in higher ed for 30 years, when he talks about the TLN, he's usually starting from a place of like, look, here's how it started when we had the first open internet, and ties the line between an open internet and an open credential standard as a way that we unleash data and opportunity for bigger and bigger and broader groups of people. So yeah,
Has
very
tremendous
lucky.
credibility, and so we're at or slightly over our hour. So give us a closing statement, Kate, and a call to action would be appreciated.
My closing statement is that we sit at a moment where, as AI becomes more ubiquitous and as the signals that we use for trust start to fail, we have this moment to redesign what things like authenticity and meaning look like on the internet. And we can go in the direction of what the TLN suggests, which is we should all be the sovereign owners and deciders of where our data goes and how we use it and what kind of opportunity it unlocks. Or we can go the other way, which is we can continue to allow mega corporations to control those identities for us. So for me personally, as we led into the trust thing, this is a real, to me, a personal privacy and literacy project that has incredible individual benefits. And for folks that share that vision of the future, this is the right, keep an eye on us. But the call to action here is if you know an intrepid institution in your region or a higher ed organization that might resonate with the work that we do, I would just always love any and all suggestions, introductions. Hey, Kate, we got this Washington State Library thing over here. I will take that and run with it because I love the opportunity to meet all these innovative organizations and see if there's an opportunity to click. So
Right.
thank you, Don.
You're most welcome, and thank you. You're fortunate to have a number of state library agencies participating today. 4 or 5 I saw, and these are to us key individuals and key institutions that vector, like libraries do, across so
Mhm.
many domains that are relevant to so many issues. And I think this has just been a great presentation, Kate. I didn't have nearly the sense of what it was all about from our earlier conversation. Now I'm just so happy to have had you on and to share this information. And thank you again.
Oh, it's very gracious. Thank you all so much for hosting me. It's really been an honor.